Very good morning, all. It's absolutely fantastic to be here. And Jeff, and thank you very much for having us here this morning. For the first time in PAY360, fantastic gathering and very, very privileged to be here. In my presentation today, I'm going to talk about how we would bridge the vision. There's a lot of expectation around national payments vision and what is expected. And there are quite a few visions that we already have looked at in the past. How do we start creating an action that will allow us to be in a better place while we wait for the national vision to conclude, right? That's the keynote that I'll try to cover. My name is Sriram Chatty. I head payments globally for TCS. So I'm going to talk a bit about us, what we do. The first time we are here, we're going to talk about Tatas and TCS. And we're going to talk a bit about what do we do. We're part of Tata Group. Tata Group has a rich heritage of 115 years of being in UK. In fact, we were founded in the UK when we were under UK's rule. And we are represented by fantastic companies. I'm sure you recognize quite a few of those already there. The Jaguar Land Rover. We do Tata Steel in use for a variety of good and bad reasons. Tetley, and of course, quite a few of other ones which you recognize. TCS in UK, about $3.5 billion pounds of revenue out of $29 billion worth of work, what we do. We recognize being the number one in the customer satisfaction, which allows us to work with almost pretty much every large organization in UK that you could imagine. And we are number one in employee satisfaction, right? 50% of the workforce that we have here are locals, represented across 54 nationalities and close to 23,000 people. With the work that we do, there is a significant amount of passion in how we take all of this and contribute to building UK's citizen life journey. Quite literally, we work all the way from how a child, from the birth of a kid, all the way down to literally the funeral part of it. We support about 1 million students in their schooling. We do about 50% of the retail shopping that you do, we touch their lives. We are 90% of most of the connectivity, what you would do is something that we regularly touch in the work that we do. About 40 million of the water or energy related work, or 50 million of the travels, and 20 million of the life and pensions, one of the largest life and pension platform, highly regulated that we run here. And of course, 12 million of overall healthcare and related stuff that we do. So that gives us a unique opportunity to be part of the critical national infrastructure of what we do for UK. While we do that for UK, we do this for more than 30 plus markets globally, and very specifically for the financial market infrastructures, where we work with the central banks, where we work with financial market infrastructures, we work with utilities, and we also work with payment market infrastructure and establishing that. I've been privileged to work on quite a few of these payment infrastructures across the globe. Just to draw an attention, in India, pretty much most of the payments which are systematically important are built by TCS, me and my team, where we've done the high-value RTGS, which is 24/7, 24/7 faster payment systems, the connectivity infrastructure for all the banks in the country, all the financial infrastructures in the country. And most importantly, the digital payments, right? What is required in the country based on digital ID. All those payments is something that we have built. And we are participating in experiments, programmability, and the future part of the CBDC is what's going to come. Well, that's the work of India, which probably you guys mostly have heard in ports. This is the other part of the UPI that you don't hear most commonly, right? What we have also done is for South Africa recently, we just rolled out a real-time payment system called PayShap. PayShap represents a very interesting vision of South Africa. Unlike the other markets where the intention is to grow the GDP and rest of the ones, the government of South Africa, central bank, and banks of Africa has a vision of how do you compete with zero, right? The compete with zero is the replacing the cash is the biggest opportunity that the banks have went after. And most importantly, how do you make the payments safe for people who are on the street? The challenge is cash is liquid, anybody can just take the cash and run away. How do you then replace that with digital payments available everywhere, something that you could use all the time without having to worry about the frauds, without having to worry about something that's taken, somebody who can take that away, right? Very different vision, very different objectives. But what we have built out is quite interesting from the start. In fact, most of it was done during the pandemic time. When we started this program, from the start to the industry testing, we have delivered this in flat 9 months. 9 months real-time payment platform, which essentially has maybe one of the first DLT platform to do the proxy resolution, because the banks would like to retain their own customer information. Nobody wants to give that out. There is no regulation to bring all the information together, right? So we have come up with an interesting idea of having DLT and allow proxy resolution to be done on top of it. Combine that with request to pay, confirmation of payee, and most importantly, the fraud and the central infrastructure of compliance being built into the core infrastructure so that we can meet the objectives of what is required. All of this, very interestingly, has been put on a public cloud, maybe one of the first public cloud real-time payment infrastructure running on AWS, right, providing 24/7, right? So that's the South African PayShap experience, very, very interesting on how the digital transformation, the objectives of the country were looked at. BIS, we just finished our work on cross-border real-time, Nexus. I'm sure some of you would have heard about Nexus cross-border real-time, where we have taken 3 countries, right? 1 in Europe, 2 in Asia, connected them with using an ISO standard-based messaging infrastructure and a Nexus gateway that allows all the aspects of doing real-time FX checks, doing the verification compliance checks for the country, and allowing real-time cross-border to happen. With those experiences, we always see that technology is foundation to the payments, and I think it's been mentioned multiple times on how technology plays this key role. In the past, financial industries always been the leader in trying to set the standards for the technology usage. However, in the recent past, with the number of technologies emerging, it is very clear that the speed of that adoption by the customers is much faster than what we could adopt. Multiple countries are seeing it. We're seeing that in UK, we're seeing that in US, where the central infrastructures have not really progressed at the pace what is required, where the consumer put demand. And in the regions where the vision was set, but if it is a vision that stays without adoption, that's essentially where there is a challenge of how you need to have a constant evolving vision to match the customer priorities. But at the same time, you need something where the ecosystem embraces it with, most importantly, the changing business models that have economic viability. I draw your attention to the left side chart, and I've compiled this from a variety of public information what's available. It's no surprise that some of the breakaway group of the top 5 real-time markets, you would see the amount of contribution, what they have made to the GDP through supported by real-time payments, is almost 10 times more than what it is from top 5 developed markets. And this is not by accident, and if you see those hockey stick curves, right, of each one of the adoption, what you would see is a very grounded strategy, right, and an ability to have a digital vision for the country laid out, where each one of these countries are able to execute that quite effectively in a short period of time and allow the markets to take the value of it. If we just dig deep into demystifying that aspect of what each one of these countries are doing right and what could we do and what can we learn for UK from each one of these. If we look at Pix is an absolute rage in Brazil, right? And I'm sure there is enough that you guys have read about Pix, but a few important aspects of Pix. 67% of the adult population in Brazil, within 15 months of the launch, have started using Pix. 42 billion transactions were rolled out in 2023, which includes about 3.5x or 350% growth in the overall transaction volume. Quite phenomenal for a system that is born in 2020, just around the pandemic time, and how could you have such a success, especially in a market which has significant amount of card penetration, both debit and credit card in that market. If you distill underneath what drive all that aspects for Pix is very, very interesting aspects would emerge. The first thing is central bank took the ownership and the drive aspect of how do we provide a robust regulatory aspect, right, of the adoption, what is required. Combined with that, synergizing some of the efforts with the overall finance vision for the open banking, combine that together. Open up the participation model so that we have both direct and indirect participants being brought in, which was a challenge earlier in order to bring that in. And most importantly, the APIs, what is required for it, both the financial and non-financial transactions, all brought together into a common view so that everything's accessible. And finally, and most debated topic here, which is how do we price this right? Brazil seemed to have got it right, where they don't charge for P2P transactions, but they charge much lower price than what it is for the cards. And that seemed to have brought in with the specialized transactions for corporates and specialized transactions for the merchants, there's a significant uptake that has started. So Brazil Pix, absolutely phenomenal story, and underneath the combination of regulatory focus, taking the ownership, open access, APIs combined with a fantastic pricing model, right? And what seemed to have worked for Brazil. If you look at India, India has taken a completely different view. I think Tony and Joe talked about some of the experiences, what each one would have felt with UPI. Well, all of you see UPI as a fantastic glowing torch of what should be a benchmark for payments or Pix for a benchmark for payments. What underneath India's payments is what is called a digital India vision, right? This is a foundational aspect of 4 things coming together. How do you look at identity of an individual? How do you create a presence-less aspects as a technology? How do you create a cashless where the access of money can happen automatically? How do you create a consent layer where you will be able to have an awareness of what you're approving and what you're accessing can be done? And combine that all with a sustainable paperless or a digital aspects of the vision, right? So what India's done is built out foundational technologies for each one of those. For example, the national ID, digital ID has been created and combined with how do you access it automatically and how do you make it available. Combine that with real-time payment infrastructure, easy access of the QR codes, right? And then you bring in both payment aggregator capability and account aggregator, which is both our open banking equivalent of financial and non-financial transactions together. And combined with registries and the signing verification, allow individuals to have their own personal registry where they'll be able to store the information. And that foundational capability, once has been set, what started happening for the individuals is now each one of them will start looking at how do I access the finance? How do I access my funds? How do I use it? How do I get my liquidity so that I should be able to start using it for a variety of purposes? How do I spend all that liquidity what I have through the commerce? And how do I formalize that entire spend, right? Through the government means, right? Because that's another challenge that we have. And this slide is busy by the very nature because what started happening is some of these foundational capabilities, what I described, now started coming together. If financial inclusion, which was a big challenge in India at one point of time, now by using digital ID combined with mobile technologies, there is a financial inclusion application of Aadhaar payment services that were created. And account opening, which is a huge challenge. Now you could go use a KYC registry, automatically identify yourself, get your IDs done, pull out information, walk into a bank, open an account, walk out, kind of use cases start coming out. The liquidity aspects of how do you provide microfinance and the access to those, variety of different use cases starting emerging. And on the commerce side of it, very interesting ONDC, open network digital commerce kind of initiatives, combining the ability to sell and buy and also allow the consumers to provide newer capabilities of signing and providing it. Lastly, government is a huge part of this entire vision. By providing government participating in this vision of how would you provide public records, healthcare records and services on one side, but also embed that into the taxes and the collection aspects, all of that put together into one large vision. This forms the Digital India. So while you see predominantly UPI and UPI-related services, it's not the magic of the UPI, the real-time payments. More than 100 countries have done that already with the similar kind of capabilities. The magic behind India's overall adoption is the Digital India stack, which is able to bring all these things together. If you specifically look at UPI, which is the cashless layer of the architecture, what UPI started is a simple P2P kind of infrastructure, trying to minimize the cost and provide access to where the money needs to be. Very quickly, it was understood that while entire India is not on smartphones, so you need to address the digital exclusion through a variety of different means. So a new set of innovations started coming out, which started addressing how do you access to IVR, how do you access to USSD, or even tone-based, right, which is quite innovative, right, and a number of things what gets done. But then, the large aspects of adoption comes with bigger problems. With 8 billion transactions, banks' infrastructure started creaking, and what was very clearly understood is a lot of those transactions, which are very low in value, started coming into the central bank money, which is probably not required. So the innovation of UPI Lite has been rolled out for anything less than 200 rupees, which is a prepaid already on a wallet infrastructure, gets done, and you don't need to enter any friction, no PIN, you just tap and go, very similar to the tap and go infrastructure that you have with the cards, right? Along with that, newer innovations of how do you use a real-time rail for innovations such as programmable aspects were tested. This was during the COVID time where government wants to subsidize and provide funding for vaccination programs, but there is a need to ensure that the money is indeed used for vaccination and it is not used for any other purposes. So what was done is to create a programmable vouchers, which is a value store, use UPI to distribute, real-time clear and settle, validate the individual, which is hospitals in this case, only to do that, and then use UPI's capability to real-time get a visibility of all these transactions. The programmability aspects of this is quite interesting to UK, especially when we need to do a welfare-related stuff that we need to roll out, or even energy subsidies that need to be where the government is concerned about, are we using the funds for the right purposes? And some of those interesting use cases will emerge. The UPI is now focused on trying to roll out the global aspects of how do you get the cross-border bilateral arrangements done for anybody who's visiting India or other way around, is where that's emerging. Drawing from those two examples, and of course many of those, quickly looking at how do we apply these to UK, right? In our assessment, UK has many of the dimensions required to be successful, to be their leader, right? Has always been a strong regulatory, one of the very unique markets where there is focus on not just risk resiliency, availability, there's also a big focus on innovation and competition through regulatory aspects, but continue to provide the consumer protection. Very unique UK in that way. There are many transformation initiatives that is already on. RT2 is supposed to provide, or rather it's already on the way to provide you a single real-time settlement account in order to optimize the liquidity so that the funds are not locked in. And combine that with new payments architecture when it is supersedes the existing faster payments and bags, will provide you a real-time clearing infrastructure that will be able to provide overlays where you can have access to the entire financial information, right? With ISO 20022 being adopted, open banking provide access to financial, non-financial transactions, and combine that with the confirmation of payee and RMN, the digital pound, I think there are enough initiatives that are started and that's in the right direction, combined with a very vibrant economy of UK, and most importantly, digital savvy customers. The customers here are very savvy, more than 80% of them already use digital instruments, and they're already are on digital ways. So if you look at all of this, everything sounds great, but why are we not seeing the adoption, and why are we not seeing the similar kind of hockey stick growth that we expected to? In our view, there are three things, that foundational elements, and most of it is our view around, on what is required. A new real-time infrastructure is required. I think there will be a temptation to look at, can we repurpose what we already have with faster payments? And that's a very dangerous temptation, because most of the capabilities was required in order to synergize what is required for open banking, what is required for new RT2 clearing settlement infrastructure will not be available, such as 20 or 22 open access, full interoperability, and onboarding of all of those. And very, very specifically, without having ISO 20 or 22, ability to fight fraud without carrying all that information will become significantly diminished. All of this combined with a collaborative and committed payment ecosystem, and the vision that we're talking about will enable UK to really realize, bring all the partners together, create collaboration and create competition. And while we open up, it is also important to have secure guardrails of regulatory so that the trust and confidence on the payments is secure. Just to close it out, it is not just creating another opportunity of payment options, but it is also an economy will lose significantly based on some of the research what we have seen for the GDP. So what's required for UK is to establish a real-time clearing infrastructure so that the synergistic aspects of all the rest of the open banking, the rest of the initiatives around the settlement infrastructure and all of those can be done, combined with the regulatory aspects and rolling it out, right? With that, I would conclude by saying UK has no time to lose. It's time to establish and have the vision established and get the infrastructure created. Thank you.
So pleased to have you on the show. Thank you so much.